profits. They had a lot of agreement across positions. It was hard to see how they disagreed, and I think we're talking about Judy Tuohy and Cassie Franklin. And I think part of that might be one of those candidates is going to have to work on council with the next mayor. And a mayor walking into some pretty serious challenges in Everett when you look at the homelessness crisis, opioid epidemic, and then a huge budget deficit that will face the next mayor in coming years. So that is a tough race, and 34% turnout is what they're expecting. I'm wondering, I mean, that's low.
It is. Again, it's an off year. Everett's also in transition. It was basically a two-company town. You had Boeing and the Everett Naval Base. And so now you have downtown revival, you have, I think it's Funco, that business that's now as an IPO.
Right.
So it's a changing city, and I think it's a time for Everett to look which way are we going, because it's either uncomfortable new technology, new businesses, or do we go back to what we know, which is Boeing and the Navy, which has gotten us this far.
Right, yeah, that's going to be
And down in Tacoma, we have Victoria Woodards is facing businessman Jim Merritt. Woodards was CEO of the Tacoma Urban League. What are we looking for in that Tacoma race?
You know, turnout again is going to be key, and I'm really surprised we're seeing these numbers that are so low, because if you're the more progressive candidate, you want that higher turnout. And 45% is not much in a presidential year, but in an off year, you need that. Otherwise, the establishment really does tend to carry the day.
Older, more conservative voters.
Absolutely.
Voting
and that's
reliably.
a race that did get a bit more divisive towards the end with, you know, clearly different views, especially on environmental issues in that region and the new power plant that they're looking at.
But that's a tension Tacoma's starting to see more and more, because they have such a historic industrial base and port. I mean, there used to be smokestacks you could see from the freeway, and yet it's now a community that has a lot of the people that used to live in Seattle that wanted to get away from the big city but still be in an urban environment, and they're trying to take a more progressive direction. So just like Everett, a city's going to challenge which direction it's going to go.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Tacoma is a city where they do not have a strong mayor format, correct? They have the city manager. They have a city manager.
Yes.
So in talking to those two candidates, Councilmember Woodards was saying, you know, the next mayor is really kind of the cheerleader for the city, the face of the city, and she was trying to stress that she had an energy to bring to the race. Merritt, the architect, he wanted to stress more of a business background, you know, getting things done. He's also a former mayoral candidate.
Yes, but you're following Mayor Strickland, who was, even as partially a member of the council, was an incredibly, not just vocal proponent for this city, but really kind of looked like a strong mayor, despite the fact there was a city manager in the background. She really led that city and stood strong.
Let's talk about the two Seattle City Council races tonight, position 8 and position 9. Both of these are the at-large. Tim Burgess, of course, not running for re-election. The two candidates are John Grant and Teresa Mosqueda. What do we expect? Any surprises in that one?
What's really fascinating is John Grant was endorsed by both the Seattle Times and the Stranger, and I can count on 0 fingers how many times that's happened before. Wow. So that really put the race in an odd dynamic, and everybody was scrambling to explain their endorsement. Teresa Mosqueda is an incredibly powerful, she's just a real leader ready to go, and I think everybody was surprised that John Grant has had such a strong race. So I'd call it a coin toss at this point.
Well, I think she definitely has had momentum in terms of all the traditional Democratic groups, because as she would say, she's the only Democrat. Grant identifies with the Socialist Alternative Party. But I think one big takeaway here, no matter who wins, the council is going to move farther to the left, because you're losing Burgess. Who is seen as a more of the moderate, you know, centrist council members, and you definitely have two very progressive pushing, and Grant, I think, during the course of the race definitely pushed Mosqueda farther to the left.
You know, he did. What was interesting, though, is you watch the dynamic play out as Grant started to sort of attract the anti-development, not in my backyard community. You watch Mosqueda get really interested in sort of the urbanist, maybe we can talk about a little more density here and there, which frankly the council's been moving away from a little bit, so that's interesting.
Okay, we have our Heather Graff is live with the Legislative District 45 race, and I hear our signal. Heather, take it away. Good evening.
Good evening, Mark. This special election election in the 45th district will ultimately decide the balance of power in Olympia, and that is why people across the state and really across the country have been paying such close attention to this contentious race, a race that is now officially the most expensive legislative race in the history of this state. Now, we are here at the campaign watch party of the Democratic candidate Manka Dhingra. Take a look and you can see her supporters are geared up and ready to go, awaiting the first results of the evening. And her opponent, the Republican candidate Jinyoung Lee England, in this race is a former congressional staffer and entrepreneur. Both women, first-time candidates vying to represent Eastern King County's 45th legislative district, which you may remember is the seat previously held by the late state senator Andy Hill, who died last year. This district stretches from Woodinville to Sammamish and includes Duval and Kirkland. But again, because of the implications this race will have in Olympia, people all over the state and even all over the country have been closely watching this one. A win by the Democrats would have big regional implications as well, with Democrats already in control in Oregon and California. Some have said a win here in the 45th district would give Democrats a sort of blue wall stretching along the West Coast. So a lot of very excited Democrats here this evening, hoping that their candidate can pull out a win. We will be here throughout the night, and of course we'll keep you updated. We do expect to hear from Manka Dhingra at about 8:15 or so. Of course, we'll let you know when she starts speaking. For now, Mark, back to you.
All right, King 5's Heather Graff on the east side. Heather, thank you. So that's a big deal, that race. I mean, a lot of people are wondering, what will Washington politics look like if the Democrats control everything in this, especially with this district as the tipping point?
You know, I would argue the Senate will still be fairly moderating voice. The House is not a huge majority right now either, and they've kept the majority there because they've kept it fairly moderate. So you'll see more progressive legislation going through, but I don't think this massive shift that everybody's been predicting is going to happen.
And you also have to keep in mind that this is a special election. So whoever wins is going to have to run again in 2018.
Okay.
Meaning they have to be careful with how they vote and the positions they take, because they will be running for re-election once again in no time.
All right, let's go to King 5's Jenna Hanchard. She's in Tacoma following the mayor's race down there. Jenna, good evening.
All right, we're joined by Tacoma mayoral candidate Victoria Woodards. We're here right now. We're moments away from checking those results.
Yes.
What are you most excited about? You talked a little bit about it, about your campaign and what this campaign has meant for you.
That's what I'm most excited about, is everyone who's in this room and about what this could mean for the city of Tacoma. I'm excited about the work that the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, we had over 350 volunteers on this campaign. So it's not, this race isn't about me, it's about the city of Tacoma, and I'm excited about the city of Tacoma.
And what are you most excited about if you get the opportunity to become mayor? What are you most excited about for this city?
About getting up every day and going to work and doing things that make this city a better place for everyone who lives here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know you got to go ahead and get ready for the results to come in, so thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And that was Victoria Woodards. We're going to be back tonight with some of the results, and we'll bring those to you as they're available. Back to you.
All right. King 5's Jenna Hanchard. Jenna, thank you. So we're just about there, just about ready for the first dump of ballots. Marco, as you look at how the political season unfolded here in Seattle, it's been a pretty wild couple of years. Where are we in Seattle with just the political landscape right now?
I think there's a lot of pent-up pressure. Seattle came through the recession. We had resurgence, which we liked, and then suddenly, as the job growth didn't stop and housing got more expensive and traffic got worse, you really saw this pivot point begin where somebody said, are we going to try to go back? And Seattle's had these battles in the past. Charlie Chong ran for city council saying, everybody that got here after 1987 needs to leave. And we kind of are at that point again, and Seattle has to choose. Are the cranes okay? Are the jobs good? And can we build more housing? Or Do we need to throttle back a little bit and return to some former time? Whether we can or not is a different question.
And what's interesting too is we've seen Seattle as a factor enter into the LD45 race, for instance, with the Republicans saying, you know, running an ad kind of poking fun, well, not kind of, most definitely poking fun at Seattle and pointing to the recent announcement of Amazon looking for a headquarters 2 that will be equal to headquarters 1 as a messaging platform that, you know, Seattle is not business friendly enough. Something that both mayoral candidates rather have acknowledged and you know, made reference to in their campaigns, that Seattle needs to perhaps be more friendly to small businesses and make it easier to, you know, to start and make businesses thrive here.
You know, after the departure of Ed Murray from the race, I would say the HQ2 search was the second biggest bomb that went off in the mayor's race this year.
That's interesting. I want to ask you guys about the Seattle City Attorney race. Normally that's kind of a yawner in city politics, but Pete Holmes, the incumbent running against a former Mayor Ed Murray staffer Scott Lindsay, that race, especially the debate that you did, Natalie, was really, it's fireworks. Where do things stand right now? What do you think we're going to see? Yeah.
You know, these are really hard races to call, and there are times when you go in and think the incumbent will win, and then all of a sudden they're out. Tom Carr, for an example, I was surprised when he lost to Pete Holmes originally. These are hard races, though, to pull across the line just because it's so down ballot. Voters don't really know Pete Holmes or Scott Lindsay, and they tend to go to the incumbent. But Scott Lindsay is taking a hard line on downtown and homelessness and encampments, and I think that could be a strong political push tonight.
Natalie, any thoughts on that race?
Well, I think when you look across that at the city attorney's race, the King County Sheriff's race, it has not been an easy year for incumbents. They've had tough challenges, and what you know, could have been an easy race have really escalated into heated races.
Yeah, another incumbent facing a challenge tonight is King County Sheriff John Urquhart.
From a major within his own department.
Yeah, within his own department. That's going to be really interesting to see how that race shakes out tonight.
It is. It has been probably the worst week ever for John Urquhart in terms of as a candidate.
Looks like we have some first results, so we'll have to scramble to read them. Took a little while.
Yep.
Sorry, folks. We're
okay.
Reading our phones as quickly as we can.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Dean goes up 55-45.
From what I'm seeing, Seattle Mayor
Where is he?
Durkin up 60 to 39.
That's a big lead. That's a really big lead.
Total votes are, again, about half of, or at this point, under half of what's expected, potentially.
Yeah.
So, okay, so here's on your full screen, 61 to 39. This is larger than anticipated.
It is, and that's a big sample. I mean, again, it's a conservative sample, but that's a big sample.
Yeah, so that's over 100,000, right around 100,000 votes.
So earlier, let me interrupt you for 1 second, the Moon campaign earlier was saying they would be happy with 45% or more because they are expecting the later votes to be the more progressive votes. But when they look at this number, Marco, having run mayoral campaigns before, what are they thinking right now?
It's going to be a long night. I mean, they're really hoping the later ballots are progressive trending, and they've got to just look like a hockey stick to swing towards her. It's not impossible, but that's tough.
King 5's Chris Daniels is standing by right now at Durkin headquarters. Chris Daniels, good evening.
Yeah, hi, Mark. I can hear you. Reuven Carlisle, the state senator here from Seattle, just hitting the stage. Hold on.
The most qualified, capable, thoughtful, gracious, progressive, insightful, entrepreneurial, dignified, generous, great, unbelievably qualified woman, Jenny Durkin, 60%. And the numbers and let's acknowledge her kind and gracious opponent in this election is currently at 39% under this first batch of votes. And that means, let's translate that for a second, 105,000 votes counted in this first round. That's 64,000 votes for Jenny Durkan, 41,000 votes. And if you happen to believe in our constitutional republic and democracy, our good friend Manka Dhingra in the 45th district up 55%.
All right, so that is Reuven Carlyle, the state senator, talking right now here at Jenny Durkan.
It's easy to
campaign
criticize
headquarters,
the institution
I think
of our constitutional republic, but democracy matters, public service matters, government matters. Jenny and her family will be down a little bit later to share this evening with us. Thank you for being here.
What do you think of these results as you hear them right now?
Well, I'm always worried before one of my candidates goes, when we get to the announcement time. But, you know, I was surprised at that. I was surprised at the 60%. I thought it was going to be closer because all elections these days seem to be close. But Jenny really hit her stride, I think, about a month into the campaign. And it was a very short campaign. There wasn't time for a candidate to find his or her stride. But she hit it early, I thought, for somebody who's never campaigned before for herself. And I was with her the last couple, 3 days, and I was so impressed with the way she communicated what she had heard from the people she had talked to on the street, the way she communicated those messages to her audiences. The other candidates seemed to be saying, I think we should do this, I think we should do that. Jenny was saying, here's what I heard in Ballard, here's what I heard on Capitol Hill, etc. So she really connected with the people and was in every neighborhood that she could get into in such a short period of time.
Yeah, we are in the midst of the crowd here, if you can see us here at the Jenny Durkan party here in downtown Seattle at the Westin. Are you surprised by the point differential right now, 21 points?
I am, but I expect that will narrow some because I do buy into this notion that what's been happening in recent elections is that, you know, some people don't know how to use the U.S. mail or don't like to. So the drop boxes are playing a bigger role. And some younger people, I think, are voting later. And they're voting, thank God for that. But they're voting later, and they're not using the mail ballot. So, you know, I think it will get closer, but anybody with 61% and this amount of votes counted in a low turnout election is going to be the first woman mayor since Bertha Landis.
Well, we knew that going into the night, that it would be the first female mayor since 1926, Bertha Knight Landis, and right now Jenny Durkan looking to be in good position. Thank you, Charlie Royer, the former mayor of Seattle, three-termer, but who's counting? Three-termer, also a former King 5 reporter. Let's send it back to my King 5 colleagues back in the studio.
Chris Daniels again, that breakdown. Durkan with about 60% of the vote and Moon with about 40% of the vote right now. We just got some new numbers that are pretty shocking in the race for King County Sheriff. John Urquhart, the incumbent, trailing Mitzi Johanknecht right now, 52% to 48%. What does that tell you, Marco? We've got about 100,000 votes in this first dump.
It doesn't look good for the sheriff. The ballots that we're going to see counted in the coming days all saw this news in the last week that came out, and I would assume they're going to trend away from him, but we don't know.
This would be a huge upset.
It would be, absolutely. But this race had charges of sexual assault from two different people. I mean, there was a perfect storm that came right to the ballot box, and we're seeing it tonight.
Wow. Okay, let's go through some of the other results. We'll scroll through some of the results there. Of course, the King County Sheriff's race. Here's that Seattle City Attorney race. This is, wow, this is lopsided.
Yeah.
Incumbent Pete Holmes was 73% of the vote to challenger Scott Lindsay's 27%. Is this unwinnable for Lindsay at this point, do you think?
I just don't see, barring anything that happened in the last week that the later voters would have seen, could change it so dramatically to turn that way. I think Pete Holmes is going towards another term.
Okay, let's continue on to some of our other results tonight. And we're going to get to Heather Graf in just a second here.
we haven't yet talked about those well, let's see, we're still waiting for results to fill in Tacoma. I'm wondering if we can go to the LD 45 race. Here it is. So we have Manka Dhingra, the Democrat, up by 55 to Jinyoung Lee England's 44. This is a pretty comfortable lead at this point, and you would expect the later voters to be more progressive. And
this looks a lot like what we saw in the primary. Not much changed, which maybe is a statement on how much money you spend in the race doesn't necessarily change outcomes. Pretty good position for Dhingra to go to the Senate.
Okay, let's go to King 5's Jenna Hanchard. Jenna, good evening. Who are you with right now, Jenna?
We don't have Jenna.
We don't have Jenna. Okay. Let's go to Natalie Swaby at Moon headquarters. Natalie.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, we are waiting, standing by for Carrie Moon, and it looks like she's going to be making her way up here in just a moment. Her campaign making it clear tonight that she was up against some pretty difficult odds, with Durkan outspending her 3-1, but they're still optimistic, waiting for all of those ballots to come in. It looks like she's going to be approaching this podium any moment, but I want to tell you a little bit about the energy in here. When she first walked in tonight, the entire room got on their feet. They were chanting her name. You could really feel that excitement and that energy. What they're waiting for right now is to hear from Carrie Moon, hear what she has to say as these first numbers are coming out tonight. Now, we want to tell you a little bit about what her day was like. She started early at the Othello station, waving to voters. She's been at the call bank. She's been doing all of the last-minute preps necessary, and tonight she was saying that she was feeling the energy from her supporters. And what they really think is going to happen here is that tonight the numbers that we're seeing are some of the votes coming from more conservative, older voters. They tend to dominate that first drop of votes, first drop of ballots, but they think that younger, more liberal voters vote later. And that's why they are very optimistic that they're going to see some gains in this race in coming days. Now, we're talking with her campaign, and they're telling us that she should be up here at this podium any moment.
Hello,
and they're talking
can I
right
have
now.
everybody's attention, please? Here she comes. Thank you. Shh. Hello, welcome everybody. I am very happy and proud to announce my friend, the brilliant, gracious, magnificent Carrie Moon.
So we're up against really tough odds. And campaign spending by our opponent broke city election records, outspending us more than 3-1. Boo. The Chamber of Commerce funneled thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on behalf of Comcast, CenturyLink, AT&T, Amazon, and others into a no-limit PAC for our opponent. But Seattle late voters may surprise everyone. We believe ballot counts may swing in our direction, will swing in our direction over the next few days, and we are not out of this yet. So thank you to my family, to our campaign team, our transition team, and our excellent volunteers and supporters for their relentless commitment to making Seattle a better place for everyone. Thank you to the many voters who expressed their support for our ideas and our vision for Seattle. I am so proud of what we all did together. So what I have learned in the last 6 months is this: the only real strength is the strength we build by doing hard work together. The way we make change in our city is not by listening to the people who say we can't, but by deciding together that we can and we must. Seattle voters won't let the future of our city be sunk by status quo thinking and politics as usual. There's too much at stake. We look forward to the next few days of ballot returns, and thank you all so much, and let's celebrate together what we did.
All right, so Carrie Moon delivering what sounded a lot like a campaign speech, not a campaign night speech. What did you take away from that?
No concession, but clearly saw the writing on the wall. And we were talking, I don't think you could say it's unequivocally done yet, but you are awfully close to that point.
Yeah, there's a 20-point gap now. Yeah. Durkin with 60% and Moon with about 40%.
And she kind of was stressing the outspending or, you know, increased fundraising by her opponent and some of the outside money potentially as, I don't know if she was, as factors that, that her campaign will have to weigh.
Let's talk a little bit about the Tacoma mayor's race, and let's dip in, if we can, to Victoria Woodards is speaking right now. Let's listen into that and talk about the results. What is it, about a 4-point spread right now, Marco?
Or smaller. It's very close. We added Desiree.
Okay, let's listen in right now. This is Tacoma mayoral candidate Victoria Woodards.
And then real quickly, if you are driving a red Honda BBU 4536, sorry for the commercial interruption, you got to go move your car. Please go move your car. Do not want anybody to get towed tonight. So then I want to thank, every Sunday we got together and there was a group. Okay, they're towing it now. If that's your car, please move it. Okay, somebody's going to get it moved. Okay, but then every Sunday night we met with a group of people, my leadership team or my working group, and here comes Allison. Allison came, oh my God, okay, Allison, come up here. Allison came all the way back home from Washington, D.C. to work, Allison, get up here, to work on the campaign. All the way from D.C. Okay, no. And then every Sunday I had this incredible group of people who got together to plan the next week of the campaign. And I want to thank Ryan Mello. I want to thank Jessica. Oh wait, I want to thank LT. I want to thank Phil. And I want to thank Linda so very much. And Tawana Franklin. That's my team.
Okay, so there you have it, Victoria Woodards addressing the crowd, and if that red Honda is yours, you need to go out and get your car before it gets towed. That's awesome. Marco, politics is still local at every level, isn't it?
It really is, and I love that they're irreverent enough that they could do that, because I couldn't see either Seattle mayor's podium speech tonight mentioning that.
No, absolutely not.
So right now she's got about 52% of the vote. Her challenger, Merritt, with about 48% of the vote. I want to get back to this sheriff's race. John Urquhart, the incumbent here in King County, trailing right now. He's got about 48% of the vote to his challengers, 52%. As this plays forward, I mean, we've got about 100,000 votes counted now. In the days ahead, how do you expect the vote to break down in terms of the type of people voting?
King County is much like Seattle. We're going to see a spread that goes more progressive, and you're going to see John Urquhart. I think it's a harder race to say who's the progressive or liberal or conservative, but I think you're going to see the lead potentially widen against him.
I'm still fascinated by, these are two candidates and an incumbent sheriff and a major within the same office. The allegations and the suits aside here, the different stuff that's been brought up in the past couple of weeks, just the internal battle that must be brewing within the sheriff's office. If you have different members, deputies picking sides here, that's going to be an uncomfortable situation to return to.
And we haven't had an elected sheriff for that long. I think it's maybe under 20 years still. And it used to be appointed, and I think for reasons even like that, maybe we return to that at some point.
Wow, that's interesting. Natalie, I know that you have to go in just a little bit here, so at some point we'll send you downstairs to go on television. Jason is our producer here right now. If we could start to scroll through the results screens that we have, we'll go through and just give you that's the one that we just talked about, the King County Sheriff's race. Seattle City Attorney race, this thing still, we talked about this just a little bit ago. This is a huge lead for Pete Holmes, the incumbent, isn't it, Marco?
You don't really see leads like that at the outset of most. So I just don't see how you could possibly see a Lindsay come back at this point.
Okay, let's move on to the next result. This is the Senate District 45. This is that district that if the Democrats hold the lead, Munkadingra holds this lead, it would tip the balance of power in the state Senate Democratic.
I had more friends contact me about this race back east than about the Seattle mayor's race, because everybody saw it not only as a bellwether on President Trump, but for Washington State and the West Coast, as the New York Times wrote about as well. So huge change, huge sea change. I think we still had a great point that because there's going to be another election in just a year, you won't see wholesale flipping of policies, but still a very different state after this race is done. I
want to ask you, Congressman Dave Reichert is retiring. Is the east side of Western Washington here, is the east side changing?
Yes.
Okay.
It used to, when I first got into politics in the mid-90s, it was solid red. And as Microsoft took hold and had more people come in, you watched the demographics change dramatically, and yes, it is much more blue now.
I think that's true, but you still also have to analyze the candidates. I mean, it's really important for that district with still a lot of independent voters and moderate voters across both sides to have the right candidates fit that district. So right now, looking ahead to 2018 and that race to replace Reichert, you have about 9 Democratic candidates and 1 Republican so far, no name, Dino Rossi. So that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. This race had someone who is very much known in the community in Munkadingra. She had high schoolers. Her son is in high school. She had high schoolers making phone calls and canvassing for her just to kind of show you the community involvement that was at play in that district.
But if you look at the wealth and the high education level in that district, which tends to be going towards the Democrats versus your work last year in Grays Harbor, where you see a long-term economic recession going towards Trump, I think it plays out right here as these voters are moving in opposite directions to the other party.
A year from now, we'll be sitting here, and that 8th congressional district, Reichert's seat, will be decided. Is there a possibility you think it could go Democratic?
There is. Actually, Hillary Clinton carried it last November, just by a hair. However, I would say the Republicans showed up with an incredible candidate, Dino Rossi, and the Democrats have yet to answer that. And the clock, in my mind, is starting to tick.
Wow, interesting. All right, let's move on to some other election results from tonight as we move away from that State Senate 45th. Here is that City Council. This is an at-large district. Teresa Mosqueda with 62% of the vote right now to John Grant's 38%. What does that tell you, Marco?
Teresa should be getting the curtains measured for her city council office. I mean, that's quite a lead. And this is the second time now John Grant has lost by a pretty substantial amount. He lost to then Councilmember Burgess, now Mayor Burgess, just 2 years ago.
Okay. And when you look at the amount of momentum she had, the group supporting her, it looks like we're just now getting an elections night release from the John Grant campaign. We don't know which way the results will go in coming days, so we're hanging tight to keep an eye on upcoming ballot drops. Regardless, this campaign has been a success for the most marginalized in our community. So no concession there, but definitely a bit of a cautious response.
Yeah, it'd be hard to see that path for him.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to another race right now. This is that King County Sheriff's race. Incumbent John Urquhart with the first dump of ballots, about 100,000 ballots, with 48% of the vote right now to Major Mitzi Johanknecht's 52%. And as we mentioned, that is going to be a really interesting race to watch as things unfold. Let's move on to another of our election results right now.
Oh, Seattle Times. Let's call it.
For Durkin, yeah.
It's the Seattle Times.
Well, that's early. Here's that other second city council race, District 9, Lorena Gonzalez with 68%. That's a sizable lead right now, Marco.
It is, and Pat Murakami really kind of ran the old Emmett Watson, go back to Seattle's past, and I just, it's looking like that direction is not winning tonight. If we watch Pat Murakami and John Grant both losing by such incredible margins.
The mayor's race in Everett, we have some sound right now from mayoral candidate Judy Toohey running against Cassie Franklin, both members of the Everett City Council. So virtually a tie in the mayor's race in Everett. Let's listen in to Judy Toohey. Okay, we will get that to you shortly. Natalie, do you have something?
Well, we just got a brand new statement from Carrie Moon, Seattle mayoral candidate. I'm not sure if we can show that full screen as we've been reminding you. She's down right now at 39%, and her statement says we are up against tough odds. So acknowledging there in a bit of more clear terms compared to the speech we heard a little while ago, that they are acknowledging that this is tough odds. As I mentioned a minute ago or so, Seattle Times has actually called this race for Durkin.
Wow. Does that surprise you, Marco, that the Times would call the race with 100,000 votes counted?
No, not with that margin. I'm not comfortable saying it right here, but I totally understand why they are, and they're looking at a map that I don't have. I would also argue that we saw some really high turnout and some very strong Jenny Durkin precincts. So she had this wave coming in that we're seeing now. Just to be clear, Carrie Moon's not going to lose at 39%. She'll be in the mid-40s, I think, when it's all done.
And just to give people perspective, we've got about 456,000 registered voters in the city of Seattle, so 100,000 votes have counted. What's the vote count, Natalie, we're expecting in terms of voter turnout? About 45%?
We're now expecting about 45%.
So that's going to be about 200,000-ish votes when all is said and done of total votes cast?
Of total, well, 45% of total voters in King County would be over 500,000. Over 500,000.
Okay, I'm talking the city of Seattle, though, for that.
The city of Seattle, yes, under that.
Yeah,
so
about 200,000. Okay, so that's interesting.
So 50% is a pretty big sample size. Now, granted, it's going to change as time goes on, but that's you need to be closer to actually overtake.
About how many days does it take, Marco? In the past, sometimes these votes just trickle in for days, it seems like.
And to be fair, it's not King County Elections' fault. It's the voters' fault who put that ballot in it.
And people like you and me.
Like, well, at least we're in the ballot drop box. Somebody's mailing it in Florida right now, and that's the person we're all
mad at. And it got postmarked.
Yes, it got postmarked, but it's going to have to trickle through the U.S. Postal Service. So that's the one that really stretches out. I think tomorrow we're going to call, we will see concessions in all of these races. And, the sheriff's race is close. We have a port race with Commissioner Creighton that's very close. But if you start to see that spread go in 2 or 3 days,
Okay, Attorney General Bob Ferguson talking right now from Munkadingra's campaign celebration.
She didn't
Let's
have
listen
the
in
big
to
money.
the Attorney General.
She didn't have the corporate checks. She did not have big oil. She did not have the special interests. You know who she had? She had you guys. She had you guys. Just one quick thing, by the way. Taking back the state senate means so much, right? It means so much on so many levels. Just one thing. The senator mentioned we have a little bit of litigation going on with the Trump administration. We have filed 17 lawsuits. It's not like I'm keeping score, but she's right. We are 5-0. We're keeping track of that. And I was a little surprised when Monka's opponent said during a debate that she thought I was going out of bounds with those lawsuits. Do you think I'm going out of bounds? And Monka didn't think so either. She didn't think so. So I am so glad to have a partner like Monka and a Democratic majority to support the work that we're doing. Last thing I want to say before we get Monka up here. Monka's coming up next, right? Okay. You know, when there was this big election coming up, I was in a lot of conversations. Big folks saying, hey, who's going to be the candidate for the Democrats? How many folks are going to run? Who's going to be the candidate? This is a huge, you know the stakes. It's a huge race. And we needed a candidate who had to combine a lot of very special qualities to handle a race of this magnitude. The New York Times is writing about it. Millions and millions and millions of dollars can be spent. There will be attack ads. You need a special candidate. You do. Someone who's smart enough, tough enough, got the work ethic, got the personality, right? The background to bring it all together. Who was that person? Who was that person? Who was that person? Monka Adigra, come on up.
Good evening. Well, the results are in, and democracy is alive and well. And it's thriving right here in the 45th district. To the thousands of volunteers who knocked on doors, made phone calls, licked envelopes, waved signs, and pounded the pavement on my behalf. To my family, Harjeet, Kavi, and Isha, and my mother, Chandan. To my staff, Louise, Dylan, Ashley, Lainey, Dane, to my interns and they are the loudest. And members of the Teen Campaign Committee, if you guys are here, cheer it. To all the dedicated volunteers, the members of Indivisible, Flippable, Sister District Project, and countless others who decided now is the time for me to step up and join a campaign for the first time. To all of you, thank you. You are what democracy looks like. And when democracy wakes up, justice wins. I want to say congratulations to Jin Young England on a race well run. It's not easy running a campaign. And it was an honor for me to have my first political campaign be against another strong woman of color. And Jin Young, your commitment to the people of our district and serving our state never flagged through a long, tough, high-profile campaign. And you know, this was a tough campaign. A lot of money was spent on this race. A lot. And a lot of it was spent by people outside our community, bent on dividing us against each other in hopes of moving their own political agendas forward. Somewhere along the way, these people started making this election about us versus them. And I don't have to tell you, in this story, I was the them. This playbook is being executed all over our country right now. When you see the politics of tribalism, misinformation, and mistrust happening around you, when you see the hate and the fear and the division walking around unafraid, it can be scary. it can be depressing, and it can hurt. And when nearly $2.5 million gets spent to aim those attacks at you personally, I mean, I'm a prosecutor, I'm a pretty tough person, but that's still not okay. And even in the face of all those attacks, I never lost courage. And do you know why? Thank you, honey. You know, it's because of each and every one of you. Yes, you do. And what I've learned from our community during this campaign is that when we are attacked with fear, divisiveness, and dishonesty, we respond with love. We respond with integrity, with honesty, and a commitment to solving problems together. And these are not values that are bound to any particular party or identity. These are values that we as members of the 45th, and as Washingtonians, and as Americans believe in. You know, I learned the power that love has to deliver justice long ago through my own family history. In 1947, when colonial India was legally separated along religious lines into what are now India and Pakistan, communities were ripped apart by religious violence, and tens of millions of Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims became refugees overnight. My family members were fortunate, but instead of staying inside and keeping their heads down, the women of my family decided to go out into the refugee camps and help migrants of all religious stripes on their journey. But this is not just a story of my family. This is the story of what makes us human. This refusal to let politically motivated divisiveness turn people against their fellow human beings. This is a power that is rooted in love, and it's one that I know will win. And it is what I have seen over and over again in this campaign. A couple of weeks ago, I met a man in Duval. He told me that he was a small government Republican who had voted for Trump, but he was going to cast his vote for me. So I asked him, how come? He said that the weekend before, one of our volunteer canvassers had knocked on his doors. It turns out that this woman was a local teacher whom he knew and admired. She told him that she really respected me, and that was enough for him. You know, when it comes down to it, this is what democracy is about. It's not about agreeing on everything and pretending we're all the same. It's about being honest. It's about being respectful. It's about disagreeing and debating. But it's also about listening and moving forward. It's about inviting that parent from your kid's soccer team who you know is on the other side of the political spectrum into your kitchen for coffee, and knowing that even if he thinks schools should be funded by property taxes and you think they should be funded by carbon taxes, tomorrow you'll still be cutting orange slices and cheering your kids on together. In this fight against misinformation and distraction and division that feels so surreal at times, it's real relationships between real people that will save us. And it's not just political conversations and neighborly debate that a healthy democracy enables. It's also care for and by each other. I recently had a conversation with a self-identified libertarian who opened his conversation with me by saying, well, I don't believe government should be interfering in people's lives. We stood on his porch for about an hour. My campaign manager doesn't like this. And we talked about the role of government in a free society and what that means. Finally, the thing that won him over was when I told him about one of my proudest accomplishments in the King County Prosecutor's Office, the establishment of the Regional Veterans Court. We have veterans who have sacrificed their lives, bodies, and minds for us. Veterans who are homeless and involved in a criminal justice system. And this is simply wrong. Often, they end up incarcerated because of untreated drug and alcohol issues, poverty, homelessness, or PTSD. When the government supports them by establishing a specialty court for addressing these root needs, it's not a handout. The goals of Veterans Court is not to make veterans dependent on government. It's to give them the support, services, and care they need so they can get the opportunities they deserve to stand up on their own again. These values, communicating with each other with curiosity and with integrity, honoring and supporting each other with compassion, and learning to solve problems together in a spirit of independence and creativity, these are the values that I will bring with me to Olympia as your state senator. And with your help, I hope to build a state government that empowers every single person in Washington to feel like they have a voice, like they have a role to play in making our democracy thrive. So tonight, as I stand before all of you who have contributed time and money and effort and pavement pounding to this campaign, saying thank you, I also want to speak to those people who didn't come out at this time or did not vote for me.
All right, Senior Deputy Prosecutor Manka Dhingra talking about what sounds, Marco, like a victory speech. She's leading right now 55% to 45%. This, of course, that state Senate seat on the east side that could very well tip the state power balance in the Senate to the Democrats. As you're listening to her, I mean, she's someone who ran on women's reproductive rights, the fact that she thinks that more needs to be done on gun control, issues that she's very passionate about. As you're listening to her, what jumps out?
That I think the GOP misjudged the closeness of this race, that she ran on not like the kind of those purple values where I'm a Democrat, but I hear you. It's like, no, I'm a Democrat. And 55-45, after all that money, they did not pick up one vote from the GOP side to come. I mean, that's really interesting and telling. I've even heard back east now the Republican Party is saying, well, this was always a Democratic seat. And that just doesn't really stand out in my mind or history.
Okay, let's go to the Seattle mayor's race. We're hearing that Jenny Durkan may be addressing the audience at some point soon. She's leading right now. If we could get that graphic up, Durkan was 60% of the vote to Carrie Moon's just about 40% of the vote. And in the squeeze back there, you can see in the small left side of the screen, that is the crowd at Jenny Durkan's headquarters there. We are going to call at this point Jenny Durkan the winner. Our staff and our political experts here on our King 5 staff have said, let's call this one. So Seattle Times have called this, and King 5 is now calling this race for Jenny Durkan. What was the big differentiation between these two candidates in your mind, Marco?
You know, you saw a lot of things break out as the race moved forward. How do we handle growth? What is going to be the encampments were talked about and how we handle them ad nauseum. We had, you know, are we going to have a utility that does internet, or are we going to have the private companies do it? We also saw a real stretch in terms of who raised more money. Jenny Durkan broke all records with a lot of shackles on her to raise over $1 million. It was incredible.
It's interesting to look at Seattle politics that I feel like there's almost some people that feel like Seattle has swung too far to the left and is ignoring businesses, and you know, the whole Amazon HQ too, you know, and when Boeing left, I mean, all of these issues, some people are saying, look, we have to take a more balanced approach as to how we treat business in Seattle.
There was a discussion of a head tax that really set the city hall afire for a while, but that doesn't seem to be moving right now. You heard the progressives push back pretty hard and say, we have a growing city, we have thriving businesses, everybody's doing well. Show us where you have the problem. Because if you're talking about taxes, that's one question, but infrastructure, education, dynamic, livable city, we're crossing all lines on that ahead of most places in the U.S.
Yeah. So we are anticipating that Jenny Durkan is going to be talking at some point soon. While we wait for that, we have some sound from the Everett mayor's race. I'd love to play that, and it looks like that's a fairly tight race at this point.
And with the slimmest of leads, I am joined here by Judy Toohey. Judy, 49 votes at this point. I was going to ask you if you were expecting it to be this close, but I think you did.
Yeah, we really did think it would be close. After the primary, you know, things went back and forth, and we anticipate both teams did everything they could do in the campaign, and you know, this is not a surprise.
I'm going to take the door off the hinge to the mayor's office.
I didn't quite catch that. I couldn't hear. Do we have results for the Everett mayor's race?
I'm trying to get them right now.
Okay.
It'll be just a second.
We will effort those in just a sec. It's either way, it's history in Everett tonight. For the first time, a female is going to be elected mayor in Everett. And there are the results right there, Marco.
Okay.
Wow, this is a squeaker.
Yeah.
Judy Toohey with 50.3% of the vote to Cassie Franklin's 49.7. All right, let's go to Jenny Durkan addressing her supporters right now in Seattle.
So I want to say there's a few celebrities in the house I want to thank. Former City Councilman Jan Drago's here. Current Mayor Tim Burgess. We got Senator Reuben Carlisle. Former Mayor Charlie Royer. Gail Tarleton's here, State Rep. And I think we got Dick Lilly in the house. Are you here, Dick? All right. City Councilwoman Sally Bagshaw. Yeah. Former City Councilwoman Sally Clark. King County Councilwoman Jeannie Cole-Wells. King County Council Chair and early on the Jenny train, Joe McDermott. And Rod Dembowski's here as well. And King County, John Arthur Wilson, are you here too? If I missed anyone, my apologies. So the Seattle Times is called The Race. so grateful to all of you who are here tonight. I am especially grateful to my family. Dan and my boys are here. They had to put up with me at every step, and for a lot of years before this. I also want to thank my campaign team. I may miss some folks, but if I do, I'm sorry. I love you all. Kelly, Aaron, Allie, Anthony and Stephanie, Thomas, Lyle, Amanda. We had the greatest team anywhere. So we were like flying this plane as we were building it. And you've all been there right along. Thank you to every single one of you for helping my campaign. It's been a great journey. It has been a long but fast journey, and I am so proud of the inclusive campaign that we've built. And I will tell you, the backbone of our campaign was working families like our nurses and firefighters, our healthcare workers, our building trades and longshore workers. There's a rumor there's labor in the House tonight. But the truly secret weapon, folks up here, folks out there, are volunteers. You guys are amazing. We had the best grassroots campaign of any mayor campaign ever in Seattle. At the end of the day today, we contacted over 100,000 voters. And again, I apologize to all those people whose dinner we interrupted and whose doors we knocked on again and again, but thank you for voting. So this campaign was never about any candidate. It wasn't about me or anyone else. It was about you. It was about Seattle and the future of Seattle. It's a campaign about what Seattle will be like for that next generation, and you have committed to making it the best Seattle ever. Now, I know there's a lot of votes left to be counted, and anyone who knows me knows I like to count every single vote. But I have to tell you, we are feeling really, really good about where we are. And I think you guys should celebrate. In fact, I have it on pretty good authority. Maybe some of you already have been. So I want to talk a little bit about the last woman mayor. Yeah. You know, 92 years later, and Seattle's about to have another woman mayor. How about that? Bertha Knight Landis, she's got a conference room. She was the first woman mayor and the first woman ever to leave a big American city. And she did it in 1926, not too long after women got the right to vote. Now, at the time, the newspapers here, they talked about Bertha and described her as this: a plain, unassuming, church-going woman. That's kind of like what they've been calling me. So last week, I was in South Seattle at the Senior Center, and I met a woman named Jewel, who's 94 years old. So she was alive when Bertha was mayor. Oh my God. She's lived in this city for decades. She's lived almost 2 lives. But today, Jewel can barely get by. I sat and talked to her, and after she pays her rent and her expenses, she only has a few $100s left. And she talked to me about how hard it was, but how much she really had faith in Seattle. So I want to tell you, Jewel, if you're watching this, help is on the way. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Bertha and that glass ceiling And when we had the Year of the Woman, you know, they gave us a year. I remember going to a conference and someone said, you know, the first people through that glass ceiling, they get cut. Well, did you notice they named this big drill after Bertha? 94 years later, it was all Bertha's fault when it didn't happen. Do you just imagine what they're going to blame on me 94 years from now? So I will be honest, running for office is not for the meek. But my mom, Lolly Durkin, she did not raise her 8 children to be meek. She raised us to be fierce and gentle. And I tell you, everywhere I went in this campaign, I knew that is Seattle, because we stand fiercely for what we believe in. But when we see our neighbors hurting, we will also be gentle, because that's the kind of future that we will build together for Seattle, fierce and gentle. And so in this time of Trump, are we going to be fierce? Yeah! And for our neighbors in need, are we going to be gentle? Yeah! And we have a lot of people hurting now, but we know that if we come together as a city, if we pull together, we can tackle those challenges. We can build that better future, that better Seattle for the next generation. Now, the other thing that Mayor Landis was quoted as saying is that she thought Seattle was not really a city, but it's really only a larger home. So that's how we have to think of Seattle. We have to build it as a place where everyone has a home, a place where people are united, where people know they have a place, where we are a city that will be equitable and inclusive, and where every person, regardless of their race, their gender, their faith, their economic status, there is a place for you in Seattle. That's the Seattle we believe in, right? Yeah. And you know what else we believe in? Science.
Now, Carrie Moon is still in the room. She's been hugging supporters and telling this crowd here tonight that this is not over yet. They are not accepting defeat. They say that their race has been up against some tough odds. They say Durkin outspent the Moon campaign by more than 3-1. But the reason why they say it's not over is they are really counting on Seattle late voters. They say those late voters may surprise everyone. They say they believe ballot counts will swing in their direction over time. Take a listen to some of what Carrie Moon had to say a bit earlier tonight.
Seattle voters won't let the future of our city be sunk by status quo thinking and politics as usual. There's too much at stake. We look forward to the next few days of ballot returns, and thank you all so much, and let's celebrate together what we did.
And right now, live, you can see she's waving goodbye to the room of supporters here, and a room that's still filled with people who are optimistic and waiting to see what the numbers show in coming days. Live in Seattle, Natalie Swaby, King 5 News.
And again, that was Natalie Swaby covering Carrie Moon there.
So let's get to our political reporter, Natalie Brand, and our analyst, Marco Lowe.
Yeah, we've been analyzing the results, and even though we heard that Moon is not conceding tonight, King 5 has called this race earlier today, the Moon campaign, saying that they would be happy with a number 45 or over. She performed under that. At this point, we've called the race.
Yes, you just don't see a path where she's going to be able to overtake Jenny Durkin. She will definitely narrow. She'll probably get to 45 or even cross it. She's not going to get over 50%.
And I have to say, I expected this race to be closer based on talking to voters and, you know, the tough fight and the interesting electorate that Seattle is and has become.
I expected a much closer race than tonight. This was surprising for her to, on the first ballot, be under 40%.
And before we send it back to the desk, one more note that You know, the work for the next mayor really begins tomorrow because they are going to have to transition into office much earlier than expected. I know you were writing about this earlier. They will be sworn in November 28th once results are certified.
3 weeks to hire up a mayor's office, get your department directors in place. It's going to be hectic.
And quickly, how many people are we talking about?
40 people in the mayor's office, another 20 directors. It's going to be busy. All
right, we'll send it back to you, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, Natalie, Marco, thank you. Let's turn to the race for King County Sheriff. Veteran Deputy Major Mitzi Johanknick is going up against incumbent John Urquhart.
So at this point in what some might call a surprise, Sheriff Urquhart is trailing Johanknick by 10,000 votes. So this is going to be one to watch as all of these votes come in. We'll keep you posted. In the race for Tacoma's mayor now, former Tacoma Urban League CEO Victoria Woodards is leading over businessman Jim Merritt. Right now, Woodard has 52% of votes and Merritt has roughly 48%, as you can see here. Let's move now to the race for Everett's mayor. It's pretty close. Right now, roughly 49 votes separate Judy Tuohy and Cassie Franklin. Coming up at 9:30, you're going to get live reports from the mayoral races in both Tacoma and Everett as well.
And now to the race for State Senate District 45 in eastern King County. Candidates are looking to replace Republican Andy Hill, who passed away last year. The district includes Woodinville, Sammamish, Duval, and Kirkland. Democrat Munkadingra is currently leading over Jin Young Lee England, 55% to 45% of the vote. And our Heather Graff is following this race, and she joins us live. Heather.
Amanda, certainly a celebratory atmosphere here at the watch party for the Democratic candidate Munkadingra, who spoke to supporters just a few minutes ago. This race has been widely watched. It will determine the balance of power in Olympia, and it is a race in which Munkadingra is now leading. Here's what she had to say just moments ago.
Respond with love. We respond with integrity, with honesty, and a commitment to solving problems together. And these are not values that are bound to any particular party or identity. These are values that we as members of the 45th and as Washingtonians and as Americans believe in.
And this race is also the most expensive in the history of the state legislature. And since it looks like Munkadingra will maintain the lead that we saw in tonight's early results, tonight she also thanked her opponent, Republican candidate Jin Young Lee England, for a hard-fought race. She told supporters tonight when she left the stage, she said, the results are in, and this is what democracy looks like. And the crowd just erupted in cheers when she said that. And then when she left the stage, her campaign manager came on stage and said she had to go to take a call from former Vice President Joe Biden, who had called to congratulate her. He had supported her in this race. And that just gives you a sense of just how watched this race was. People across the state and across the country even paying very, very close attention. And again, if the results we're seeing right now hold true, it looks like the Democratic Party will now have complete control in Olympia, in the governor's office, of course, in the state house. And with this win in the 45th district, it looks like they will also get control of the state Senate. That is the very latest live tonight in Woodinville. Heather Graff, King Cloud News.
Okay, we want to check back in with Natalie Brand and Marco Lowe. Guys, we just heard Heather's report. What's the biggest takeaway from all of this that we just heard?
Well, I can tell you I just received an email into my inbox from the DNC congratulating Munkadingra. Even though I checked in with the England campaign, she's not conceding tonight because a campaign spokeswoman told me that later votes were actually potentially favoring her, although that goes against what we've seen conventional wisdom, later votes being more progressive. In this district, there were still a lot of later voters, independent-minded voters, so maybe the numbers shift around a little bit, but it looks like Dingra will likely hold a comfortable lead in this race.
Later votes in the primary favored Dingra, and this is almost the exact number we finished at in the primary, so it's hard to make the case that we're going to see a comeback.
In terms of what it means bigger picture, as we were discussing earlier, because this was a special election, the winner is going to have to run again in 2018. So there's another tough fight ahead just around the corner, and that could mean that, you know, there's not as much movement on extremely different progressive votes and pushes in the legislature next year.
The incumbent protection plan for Dinkrah started about half an hour ago, and it's going to be a very moderate direction for her.
Okay, but it does mean if she holds on to that lead that the entire West Coast is blue when it comes to state governments.
Correct, and you will see more progressive legislation coming out of Olympia immediately.
All right.
I just want Marco to weigh in on the tone of this race. It got incredibly negative, especially as we got to the end. Did you find that those negative ads swayed voters one way or another?
You know, with $8.5 million spent, it's hard to argue that they did if it still stayed locked at 45-55. So I would say, as nasty as it got and as much money as was spent, it looked like a governor's race. It didn't sway many people.
And I have to say, I mean, that's a product of so much of the outside money coming from out of state, and also the fact that this race is really just an early start to the next race that will happen next year.
Okay. Natalie, Marco, thank you. We'll be checking in with you later on in the hour. So now let's turn to the race for Seattle City Attorney. Incumbent Pete Holmes is running away with this one. He's got 73% of the vote. Scott Lindsay with 27% of the vote. And King 5 is calling this race for Pete Holmes right now.
We're watching two Seattle City Council positions right now, and position 8 is to fill Tim Burgess' seat. Teresa Mosqueda has the comfortable lead with 62% of votes, and this is over John Grant. And now, Seattle Council position 9, Lorena Gonzalez is leading with 68% of votes over Pat Murakami.
These are the top races in Western Washington, but there are more than 670 races around our entire region, from Pacific County to Chelan County. We have all the results on King5.com and the King5 mobile app. But don't go away, because we're going to be tracking the election results all night long, and you can see more of the races at the bottom of your screen.
Coming up.
got Dick Lilly in the house. Are you here, Dick? All right. City Councilwoman Sally Bagshaw. Former City Councilwoman Sally Clark. King County Councilwoman Jeannie Cole Wells. King County Council Chair and early on the Jenny train, Joe McDermott. And Rod Dembowski's here as well. And King County, John Arthur Wilson, are you here too? If I missed anyone, my apologies. So the Seattle Times is called The Race. I am so grateful to all of you who are here tonight. I am especially grateful to my family. Dan and my boys are here. They had to put up with me at every step, and for a lot of years before this. I also want to thank my campaign team. I may miss some folks, but if I do, I'm sorry. I love you all. Kelly, Aaron, Allie, Anthony and Stephanie, Thomas, Lyle, Amanda. We had the greatest team anywhere. So we were like flying this plane as we were building it. And you've all been there right along. Thank you to every single one of you for helping my campaign. It's been a great journey. It has been a long but fast journey, and I'm so proud of the inclusive campaign that we've built. And I will tell you, the backbone of our campaign was working families like our nurses and firefighters, our healthcare workers, our building trades and longshore workers. There's a rumor there's labor in the house tonight. But the truly secret weapon, folks up here, folks out there, are volunteers. You guys are amazing. We had the best grassroots campaign of any mayor campaign ever in Seattle. At the end of the day today, we contacted over 100,000 voters. And again, I apologize to all those people whose dinner we interrupted and whose doors we knocked on again and again, but thank you for voting. So this campaign was never about any candidate. It wasn't about me or anyone else. It was about you. It was about Seattle and the future of Seattle. It's a campaign about what Seattle be like for that next generation, and you have committed to making it the best Seattle ever. Now, I know there's a lot of votes left to be counted, and anyone who knows me knows I like to count every single vote. But I have to tell you, we are feeling really, really good about where we are. And I think you guys should celebrate. In fact, I have it on pretty good authority. Maybe some of you already have been. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the last woman mayor. Yeah. You know, 92 years later, and Seattle's about to have another woman mayor. How about that? Bertha Knight Landis, she's got a conference room. She was the first woman mayor and the first woman ever to leave a big American city. And she did it in 1926, not too long after women got the right to vote. Now, at the time, the newspapers here, they talked about Bertha and described her as this: a plain, unassuming, church-going woman. That's kind of like what they've been calling me. So last week, I was in South Seattle at the Senior Center, and I met a woman named Jewel, who's 94 years old. So she was alive when Bertha was mayor. Oh my. She's lived in this city for decades. She's lived almost 2 lives. But today, Jewel can barely get by. I sat and talked to her, and after she pays her rent and her expenses, she only has a few $100s left. And she talked to me about how hard it was, but how much she really had faith in Seattle. So I want to tell you, Jewel, if you're watching this, help is on the way. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Bertha and that glass ceiling. And when we had the Year of the Woman, you know, they gave us a year. I remember going to a conference and someone said, you know, the first people through that glass ceiling, they get cut. Well, did you notice they named this big drill after Bertha? 94 years later, it was all Bertha's fault when it didn't happen. Do you just imagine what they're going to blame on me 94 years from now? So I will be honest, running for office is not for the meek. But my mom, Lolly Durkin, she did not raise her 8 children to be meek. She raised us to be fierce and gentle. And I tell you, everywhere I went in this campaign, I knew that is Seattle, because we stand fiercely for what we believe in. But when we see our neighbors hurting, we will also be gentle, because that's the kind of future that we will build together for Seattle, fierce and gentle. And so in this time of Trump, are we going to be fierce? Yeah! And for our neighbors in need, are we going to be gentle? Yes! And we have a lot of people hurting now, but we know that if we come together as a city, if we pull together, we can tackle those challenges. We can build that better future, that better Seattle for the next generation. Now, the other thing that Mayor Landis was quoted as saying is that she thought Seattle was not really a city, but it's really only a larger home. So that's how we have to think of Seattle. We have to build it as a place where everyone has a home. A place where people are united, where people know they have a place, where we're a city that will be equitable and inclusive, and where every person, regardless of their race, their gender, their faith, their economic status, there is a place for you in Seattle. That's the Seattle we believe in, right? And you know what else we believe in? Science. Seattle will continue to fight for climate change, and we will help lead this country. And we believe everybody has a right to shelter and a home. And we will work as hard as we can to bring everybody inside until that happens. We believe in full justice and equality, and we will not rest, and we will keep fighting until we get it. And in this time in our nation, we know that we need to face that deep wounds of systemic racism. And we will not be afraid to look in that mirror, to heal those wounds, and to make our hearts better, because that's who Seattle is. And for you parents out there who are struggling so hard to get by, and you're worried about your kids and you're trying to get them through school, please know that if they graduate from a Seattle public school, college is on the way. You know, we're also a city that has been blessed with a great economy, even though many, many have struggled, and we believe in diverse businesses that make up the heart of every neighborhood, who employs so many people. And I will tell you, walking the neighborhoods of Seattle, meeting with the small business owners, and knowing that they really are the work engine of this city, thank you for all you do. So, you know, I started this campaign, and it was beautiful weather. What happened to that? We've walked neighborhoods, we've knocked on doors, and this weekend I was doing it in the rain, the snow, the sleet. I could work for the post office. But after all those miles, I will tell you one thing, and I know you agree with me, I love Seattle. I am more optimistic today than when I started this race. We have real challenges. Affordability is crushing Seattle. The homeless need a home. Our transportation system has challenges. But you know what? I know we're up to the task, and I know it because of everyone in this room, everyone at home, in all the neighborhoods I'm walking. People in Seattle care. We will build a better city, we will build a better future, and we can be proud of it. You know, we really can show
what votes less than 1%. Judy Tuohy hanging on with the slimmest of margins over Cassie Franklin. Both candidates held rather muted celebrations with their supporters tonight. Clearly no victor to be named at this point. Judy Tuohy at the Shack Arts Center, where she is CEO, and Cassie Franklin at a coffee house just down the street. Both women made the homeless and addiction epidemic in Everett their top priorities. Only a few hundred votes separated the two in the August primary, and that separation is down to now less than 50 votes on election night. Neither candidate surprised at how close this race is tonight.
We really did think it would be close. After the primary, you know, things went back and forth, and we anticipate both teams did everything they could do in the campaign, and you know, this is not a surprise.
You know, I hope the campaign we ran in the last few days, honestly throughout the whole campaign, is working to get a broader demographic out to the polls, out to vote, folks that traditionally haven't felt represented in our community. So if they came to the polls, they turned in their ballots, I think we'll do well.
And if you're trying to predict how this may play out over the next couple of days as these votes are counted and possibly even recounted, listening to what Cassie Franklin said there at the end is really critical. It was her campaign that tried to get out new voters, those who typically hadn't voted before in this community. That was really her groundswell there to try to win this race, and that's typically not what happens in these off-year elections. Typically we see fewer of those types of voters. We see more older voters, more established voters, and that could spell some bad news for Cassie Franklin as these votes are counted. But again, with a lead of just 49 votes, Judy Tuohy certainly should not be sleeping too easily tonight. And let's not forget that whichever candidate wins this race will become the very first female mayor in the city of Everett's 147-year history. Live in Everett tonight, Eric Wilkinson, King 5 News.
Okay, Eric, so Everett making history tonight. We do want to check back in with King 5 political reporter Natalie Brown.